you guys have a chance to see the email I just sent out? No. I think the conversation is important to have. I think we can almost say yeah.
Just means that we community and they have to be really close, that's what but it's how many discussion.
All right, it is 6 p.m. and as I want to do, generally I respect time and start time. So my name is Tom Mahoney, I'm the superintendent of schools here in Oregon. And one of the parents reached out to me and said, when are we going to have an opportunity to do this face to face? And so I thought that was a really good idea. So I scheduled the town hall. Obviously, I appreciate anybody who came tonight, especially given that we had such short notice. My intent is to cover a couple of things that have come up in most questions, and the last thing to cover is masks, because my experience has been that's the topic that causes the most conversation. Does that make sense? So we'll get the other questions out of the way first and then come back to masks. So you'll see the list of the potential topics here. The first thing is about remote learning, a common question. Why doesn't my child have the option to remote learn? Great question. Under Illinois school code, student attendance is based on their butts being in classrooms. It is not even based on them being in the school, it's about how much time they spend in the classroom. And they must have 300 minutes a day in the classroom of instruction. Last year, or in the spring prior to that, the governor issued an emergency order, executive order, and he allowed the State Board of Education to waive portions of the school code to ensure that we are providing education. And so last 2 springs ago and last year, this term remote learning came into play, and we offered remote learning. When the governor's June 24th order, executive order expired on July 25th, that ability by the Illinois State Board of Education was removed. So that's no longer an option for schools to offer. It doesn't exist. What we can offer is, if a child has a medical condition that does not allow them to be in the building. So the example I use is, if a child had leukemia, given the current pandemic, a parent would probably not want that child exposed to day-to-day interaction with students. During what we call homebound instruction, we will provide ongoing support, ongoing instruction for our students at home for long-term care, but that would need a medical home. Then there's the idea if a kid gets quarantined, we will then provide them asynchronous learning for the length of their quarantine. And for all the students in the district, there will be online tutoring available 24/7 for them, or for you to access to get additional support. So that was our plan with remote learning, why it isn't an offering now, and what we're going to do to address it. Does anybody have a remote learning question? Okay.
I do.
Okay, yes.
So what happens if there's a severe outbreak of COVID? Is there going to be like an amendment to that rule? Are they going to allow it then?
So if the question was, what if we have to shut down again? Let's just say we have this huge outbreak and we have to shut down schools. If we're shutting down, then we'll revert back to what we did last year, and teachers will be synchronous online or asynchronous depending on the grade, and providing that instruction via online. And then again, the tutor is still available. If it's all of us, we'll move to synchronous learning as a way to provide that support.
Okay.
Good question. Anybody else on remote learning? Yes.
Something with remote learning is the governor keeps extending executive orders for mask mandates, but yet they're definitely certain.
Yeah, so the comment was that, the government extends, in fact, extends executive orders. Why didn't we extend that one? And the reason is the state last year forced us to provide them data on learning loss. So compared to a regular year, where were our kids when they came back after the first time out, and then after this time on the state test? There's a significant drop in learning across the state for students who were remote learning. Our experience has been that a large portion of our students who remote learned all last year are significantly behind their peers who were in person all last year. So I think the intent was good, because don't forget again, they didn't know what the CDC was going to say. And based on our original plan, I'm assuming that many of you were supportive of the original plan that made masks optional, that it made sense to be in person, right? So it seemed to be aligning to what made sense for all kids, but obviously that changed. Other questions or comments about remote? Close contact. So this may be a hidden plus here of the mask mandate. In the guidance, it's specified, if a student is at least 3 feet away, which is now considered social distance, from the person who's infected, they are not considered a close contact if they have a mask on. So if everybody is masked and they're 3 feet away, there's no more close contacts. I'm going to do a soft estimate. I haven't pulled the data and looked. 97% of our quarantines and sending kids home were close contact related, not positivity. That's the thing that killed us the most last year. Wasn't the students who were positive. If your student happens to be closer than 3 feet, or they weren't masked, there is an option if they're not symptomatic to stay in school. So the option is the Abbott test called the Binax Now test. They would get tested on day 1, 3, 5, and 7, and they could actually stick to school. I've got more information about that in the next slide. But we can reduce the number of kids who get sent home because of close contact, because of the new IPH rules and the CDC with masks. So the upside of masking is we're gonna have fewer kids who get quarantined due to close contacts. And even if they are close contact, there's some testing out processes that didn't exist before. Any questions on close contacts?
So,
Yes.
so for the testing, is it gonna be like the traditional testing where they shove it all the way up your nose, or is there a different testing for kids?
That's a great question. So the only testing we have access to is the nasal swab.
Oh.
So that's the one that we have, that we get from the state for free, that we can offer for free for all students and staff here. There is, in the guidance, you'll see there's some other ways to shorten the quarantine period. None of those are shortened without going and getting a PCR test, which is the test that generally takes 48 hours to get the results back. I don't know if they have saliva test for PCRs, if they may or may not. I don't know.
They do have slides.
Okay, yeah. So that would be another option. Jim? So the test results, if they're positive, must be shared with the Oak County Health Department. So the only people who would get the test result would be the parent, the student, and then if they're positive, we must share them with the Oak County Health Department. Yes?
You share the negative so that way it doesn't look like her.
Yeah, you'll know they're negative because we're not calling you and say, hey, come take them off. Yeah, our intent is to share all the results, not just the positive results, and try to track that as part of our data in terms of the testing out policy. How many kids actually got to stay with the testing out? If you didn't sign up on registration for the Binax Now test and you want to do that, all you have to do is call your school and say, I'd like my son or daughter have the opportunity to be tested if they need to. So I'll get there and I'll compare. Yes? Great question. So the question was, if a student, let's let's say, looks symptomatic, and they get sent down to the nurse's office, will we, and the parent didn't check the box to test, will we test the child without parent information? No. In every case, we're going to start, the first test would be, and say, hey, Johnny's down here, he's symptomatic, we'd like to do a test. And then if the parents say, sure, that makes sense, and we'll do it. If they don't want us to do it, we won't do it. If you're in the test and stay protocol, once you give us day 1 yes, we're not gonna call you day 3, 5, and 7. But we'll ask you the first time if you want that. Yes?
So if they're wearing masks, they're wearing masks, they wear it in transportation, they wear it in school. When are they gonna be within 2 feet, when are they gonna be without a mask? So my issue
So the question is, when could they be a close contact? So theoretically, they've got a mask on the bus, they've got a mask on in the classroom, when is this going to happen? Okay, the reality is, we're gonna do our best to keep kids 3 feet apart, but we also don't want to stop any social interaction. There are gonna be times when they're closer than 3 feet. And the playground outside, they're not wearing masks. When they're eating lunch, they're not wearing masks. So if, theoretically, if your child sat next to a child who was positive and was even 3 feet, but they were without a mask on, then they could be considered a close contact. If they're outside and they played in close proximity, I don't know what close proximity would be, they would wear masks. Now, would we know that? I don't know that we would be able to track all that down in our close contact tracing. Generally, we're calling the classroom teacher saying, hey, was this kid around anybody else? So if the better we do with keeping them apart, the better chance they have of not being in close contact. But we will have times where, just because of how we're interacting, they may be closer to 3 feet. Does that answer your question? And I want to be clear, not that you like the answer, but that, yeah. Okay, yes, Greg.
So, I'm just curious about something. You plan on doing all this during, we'll just say the next couple of months, what happens in winter time? Right? Winter time, they're all gonna be inside, they're not gonna be nobody's gonna wanna go outside like they had last year, when we had a deep freeze for what, a month and a half. So now the kids are gonna be in close proximity at all times, right? You're also gonna be telling us right now, you're gonna keep them 3 feet apart. So what is the point of them getting together? I mean, they can't get together as it is now. You're going off and telling us that you're gonna keep them a certain distance, as best you can, correct? You're worried about them getting in contact with someone who's positive, which of course is all guessing. Who's gonna be positive and who's not gonna be positive, because you're gonna be using what test? I'm just curious, which test are you gonna be using? The same one that has been, I don't know, one false positive constantly.
So I'm not sure what your question is. The name of the test is the added Binex Now test. It's the only test we have available to us. Pardon me?
Where did that one come from?
That was one of the first antigen tests approved for testing back in the original part of this from Abbott.
It's not a rapid test.
It is a rapid test, yeah. It's an antigen test, so it's not a PCR, it's an antigen test, and it's a rapid test. Within 15 minutes, we usually get the results back.
Right. Oh, those are all false positives. The majority of them are false positives.
Just so you know, the antigen test doesn't tell you if you had it. So it just tells you if you have antibodies.
I had it. I'd rather.
So I appreciate, so I want to be clear, let's start with, I should start here. I'm going to share answers with you. I have tried to be as transparent and open about this as possible, even when I knew you would not like what I said. So I'm going to tell you at least my truth and how I understand things. I'm certainly not infallible, I'm not a physician, and I'm not a researcher, so I don't have all the information. So all I'm asking is that when we have this exchange, I'm not asking you to like my answer, because I don't think that's always going to be the case. But just know I'm trying to be as honest and open as possible with you, so you get the answer. It will not change until something else changes. So you're getting a consistent answer. So let's go back to this. Are there any more questions about quarantine? Because we're going to get the masks next. Yes, quarantine, Jim.
When someone gets quarantined, are we going to have some
So the question is, when they get quarantined, we'll get more detail than close contact. I don't think so. I'd be open to it if it was something that was manageable and usable. So I don't know what would be more helpful. If you could give me an example of what you're talking about.
Just any clue, like, hey, Billy was next to Sally at one shot. Instead of just, close contacts around.
Oh, like where the close contact was.
Yeah, so potentially we could say where, we couldn't say who, because we can't release, I know this sounds the same, we literally cannot release the information your kid can tell you about. We can't tell you that, we can't release that specific student information, so.
But student A, by student B.
Yeah.
Instead of just, hey.
Yeah, we could say you were a close contact to a presumed positive or a positive. I think the hardest thing for us is that when they changed the rule from presumed positive to positive, it became much more challenging for us. Because even the kid who was positive or thought to be positive, they didn't have to go get a test. Even if they tested negative, your child was gone. Now at least we've got a process to keep them in. Other questions about quarantine, Jess?
It's about the close contact, but who's tracking the position of every student at every time throughout the day to be able to, verify, oh, you were a close contact, you were not?
Well, the great thing is we're gonna implant microchips in them. Yeah, like you weren't already worried enough, like that, like, we're not. So here's what we do. We rely on our staff's memory to say, okay, Tommy was sick. Who was he around without a mask on or closer than them for 15 minutes? And then the staff will tell us. So the health staff does that work with our staff around those children. Now, do we catch all of them? No. Is that a great scientific way to do it? Absolutely not. My guess is there is more kids escaping close contact than kids being identified by close contact. Good question. Cool. Yes.
I just have a question about the option 1 quarantine. Is that if you don't get your child tested, you're not tested at school, you're just out for 14 days?
Yeah, so you can, again, I'm drawing my own conclusion here. When the CDC came up with this, they obviously want you to get tested for something, right? So if you do nothing, you say, hey, they're presumed positive, close contact, or quarantine, it's 14 days. And then you can see that the reductions occur based on the mitigation methods you take. Yeah.
So the only way that kids can stay if they're a presumed close contact is to do the test.
The question was, is that the only way kids can stay in? The answer is right now, yes. That they get the tests 1, 3, 5, and 7.
I'm just worried about the test and kids
Yeah.
like freaking out, like they have to go that far up.
Yeah, so I haven't had it done, maybe I should go get an experiment so I can tell you. So one of our goals was to make this year as normal as possible, knowing that it couldn't be all fully normal. And believe me, the last thing I want is,
Right.
I'm coming to school every other day and getting probed.
Yeah, because I know that with kids, do they not go as far up so kids are able to handle the test a little bit better?
Does somebody have expertise in that?
Even for children?
You have a question?
Yeah.
Okay, hold on a second, we got any questions for that? Oh, you're talking about the waiver that is floating around. So that's, we have not received it. We've received a blanket response from our attorney for anybody who provides that. That's actually an IDPH, Oakland County Health Department order. That's not an Oregon order. So that would be something that you would take up with them. I don't know if you've seen this. There's a general statement that's floating around that's come out that has some legal ease in it. It talks about the legality of the quarantine order and some type of parent permission to do it. I can tell you that if a student's quarantined and is not testing, we will not allow them back. Question? So I believe the way this worked last year is if the sibling if I'm the sibling who's in close contact, you don't have to test my siblings because I'm not presumed positive. If I become symptomatic, then they would become close contact. So right now, it would just be me, it's not. So it's the one person away, not the two people.
You're saying you have to get tested, so let's say some parent says, don't want my kid to get tested, okay, because I'm sure there's gonna be some, okay? And you're saying that without that test, now back to school, is even past the 14 days, you're saying too?
No, I'm saying at 14 days, you'd be back.
Yeah, you'd be back to
Yeah, you'd be back at 14 days.
Can we get tested somewhere else, like a spit test, as opposed to this?
So based on the guidance, no. So you'll see, if you get a PCR test, you would have to you shorted 7 days, you would have to get tested. If you got a PCR test in 1, 3, the reason they're doing this, there would have to be a rapid test because you have to know the results immediately before. So that's good. I guess I could ask the question to the health department if they had access to a rapid test, and they would want it to be a medical facility, not a home test.
Right, because there are medical facilities
Right.
that are around the area that wouldn't be as, I guess, traumatic,
Invasive,
you
yeah.
know, like having someone hold your kid down if you consent to that, like that's kind of a traumatic
Yeah,
experience for a
believe me,
child.
I fully understand anybody who's reticent to have their child with the names. I can tell you, growing up, my dad wouldn't have cared about me, would have just, would have been, which you're crying, but we're at a different age now. Yes.
And is it just the school nurse who's administering all these?
So it's anybody on our health staff. So we have nurse aides and nurses in the other buildings who have been trained on how to do this by the Old County Health Department, but it's only the health staff. Yes, Joe.
He was pushing that if you get Pfizer, that shot, vaccination, you won't be quarantined.
So you are right. If a child is vaccinated, none of this matters. You're not considered a low close contact if you're vaccinated. This is only for unvaccinated children. And then the other question we get is, do we know who's vaccinated? I don't personally. Our nurses have access to the iCare system, where anybody who's vaccinated, they have access to that information, they'd be able to verify that. So, Aaron? Yes, go ahead. Well, again, I said you're not a close contact. If you're symptomatic, you'll go home. So if you're vaccinated, doesn't mean you stay forever. It just means you're not considered a close contact by the IPH and the CDC. All right, yes. So if there are 14 days, we'll get asynchronous information. Teachers will send information home. And then there'll be tutoring on demand available 24/7 for students who need additional support in doing that work. And as always, our teachers will be as available as possible to help support students as they go along. Question? Yes?
So who determines who needs to get tested?
Who determines?
It's the school nurse.
So it's not who needs to get, oh, you mean like randomly tested because they,
Oh, yeah, somebody said somebody's sick. Because if you're in high school, I mean, this would be perfect. Well, I want to get quarantined for 14 days. 14 days off.
I want to punish my parents, right? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so if kids self-report symptoms, we can't say no, right? Yeah. Yeah. Although I would like to at times, but we cannot. Believe me, now I'm thinking maybe I should do that. Yeah. Yeah. All right, are we done with quarantine and close contact? Yes. One more question. So I had published that in our plan based on the previous CDC guidance that was out. When the new guidance came out, they changed everything in quarantine to this. So in my guidance, I said if we get any more additional information, then we'll have to adjust the plan. So the plan literally changed because IDPH modified it after the CDC modified it. And you'll see the dates that stuff came out. For school, we were waiting in June end of May and early June for this information to plan all year long. And they pushed it out in August with school starting. Some schools don't start in September, but a lot of schools start in August. So that's why that changed. If you look at the IDPH guides, it changed. Yes. Yeah, it'd be no different when, yeah, like we see kids all the time who had that down at the desk, you touch the forehead, they're sweating, how do you feel, Johnny? I don't feel well. So it would be the same thing. Now, our teachers are not hunting for students, right? There's no reward for the number of COVID kids you find. Generally, our teachers want our kids in our buildings. But if a child looks sick, they're gonna send them down as they usually do, not any different.
My son had allergies, and obviously allergies are common, especially now with my age. And a lot of times, you're last year, but are we gonna be?
So the question is, if I have some condition, so I have migraines, or my child has conditions, as a migraine or has allergies, or some type of other condition that's not COVID related, how do we know? So what I would suggest you do is go to your physician, get a note that says, Johnny has no allergies, this is what we expect them to regularly come on, communicate with our nurse, and then I have to go back and read, but there may have been some latitude, I'm not 100% sure about exclusion that just automatically say, it may be with a test that they don't go home because they're within that. But I'll have to check. Yeah, and again, I understand the concern. We sent kids home and staff home with migrants, and we didn't want them. So I entirely understand the frustration. Fail safe to protect them against that. So then I said I have to reread the guidance. I thought there was something in there if it was documented, because last year we were told it doesn't matter if it's migraines or not. We're not excluding anybody, so we didn't have any. That was the rule. So I thought there was some change. I'll have to reread that. So I think it was more comment than a question. Aaron's frustration is my kid keeps getting sent home, what's the point? I wish I could stand here and say, well, here's the answer. I agree. Believe me, I know you were frustrated. I was just as frustrated as you were last year, this spring, and now with the recent guidance. Other questions? Yes. So if you're an outdoor sport, no mask required. If you're an indoor sport, mask on. I don't know how they at least I haven't read specific guidance that said, last year it was, if one was gone, they were all gone. So I don't know if they're gonna change that or not, or they're allowed to be able to test in, to stay if they test in. But my guess is I don't know why the testing procedure wouldn't apply for that. And again, if the kids are vaccinated, the older kids, obviously, they don't get one. Other questions on this stuff? Oh. So I'm going to say my piece, your board, your administration, and with in cooperation with both, we have two associations, Support Staff Association, Teacher Association, all supported the original plan. So So to be clear, 100, I don't want to say 100% of our staff, but 100% of the representatives of those staff supported having the original plan. The governor came out with a mandate, it was an executive order. I've had lots of feedback from lots of people who are either lawyers or pretending to be lawyers about how I should interpret that. Here's what I did. First thing is I called our attorney. And we have two different attorney firms. One's pretty aggressive, one's pretty conservative. Called the conservative one, knew what I was going to get. They said, you need to follow that. If not, you're exposing yourself to losing tort immunity for something that would happen, you would have no coverage. Okay, understand. Called the other one, echoed the same thing. Called our insurer, got the same thing. So my recommendation to the board was that they adopt the governor's mandate. To educate the board, I explained to them that last year, 3 schools said they were going to defy the mandate of the executive order that I get told is not legal. They were brought to court, the governor, the AG brought them into court, and they were all forced to apply that mandate, and they all did comply with the mandate. So these were 3 schools who defied the governor. You can look at Huntsville as one of the public schools, and they were sued, they were forced. Additionally, I was told by one of our attorneys that the governor's executive order has been challenged 69 times by attorneys and other entities. I believe he's lost once or twice in the preliminary hearing. And then upon appeal, he prevailed. So he is 69-0 in mandating that are stating legally that his executive orders are enforced. And lastly, we had a kind of a rumor that the State Board of Education would begin to not recognize you as a school. And what that means is, if the state does that, is you get placed on probation immediately, you have to come up with a plan to address why you're on probation. Well, if you defy the governor's order and say mask optional, the only thing that they're going to say you're doing wrong is you're defying the governor's plan with mask optional. What are you going to do to correct that? Then there's a hearing, and then there's some other stuff that happens. The worst case scenario is if you, as a school, get not recognized. This is certainly funding, that's part of it. I don't think that's the worst thing to happen. Your students cannot participate in any IHSA events. If you're not a recognized school, you can't participate in the IHSA. So that means kids can't be in, we can't compete in sports. So our district has 4 pillars: academics, activities, leadership, and service. One of our pillars would be eliminated for most of our kids, they would not be able to do it. So based on those things, again, not asking you to agree with me, or even think that's wise of me, I recommend the board they follow the governor's mandate. Until, or unless, one of these legal cases in the 69, he becomes 69-1, and there's a path forward to challenge that executive order. So with that, I open up to questions or comments. Aaron? The board will know. The board will vote on Monday to ratify the plan or not ratify the plan. No, it wasn't voted. So the question is, did they vote on? So for this type of plan, I don't need board approval. The reason we do board approval is because it's such a community topic that I don't want to just push it through without you having a voice and where to go and say, hey, we're really frustrated about this, or we don't agree with this. Now remember, those 7 people are paid $0 to donate their time and energy to help support students. So they are not trying in any way to make your kids' lives not wonderful. So I hope that you certainly disagree with them, and I believe you have the right to exercise that right. But hopefully we can be respectful of them in the position they're in.
So did you send out a questionnaire to the community on what you should do, knowing that you work for us and we pay your salary?
And what I should do about what?
On mask mandate? Because what's wrong with calling all that stuff that the governor says? We can't just go about business as we normally do and wait to see what happens. Because honestly, I think that the problem has become, people wouldn't pay attention, is that schools particularly get away with just doing whatever they want to do compared to what parents want them to do. So I just think that it should be out in the community with a questionnaire that says, okay, we have 1,000 people. Well, 950 said that I should tell the governor to go, go get screwed. So that's what I'm going to do based on what people were paying me to do. You understand what I'm saying?
So I don't know if you heard, the question was, did I do a survey after the mandate, the executive order came out, of families asking, should I comply or not comply? My answer was no, and the comment was, I think that what should happen is schools should do more of that to see what the community or the parent's position is before making a decision on not only this issue, but other issues. Would that be accurate?
Yeah.
Okay.
That kind of brings up something that's been a larger issue of COVID and everything else, is that parental rights in the school don't seem to be, and Tom and me have talked, I'm sure he doesn't like to see around the top.
But I answered.
Yes, and I will say, Tom has, when I brought the pipe to Tom, Tom has acted on it. Now, it might not have been the way I wanted it, but he acted on it. There was severely questionable content last year that was brought to his attention, was moved to the kindergarten program. And I think we all need to applaud him for that, because not every superintendent would be looking out for your kid. And I said that the teacher didn't think it was, and then he gave her the benefit of the doubt, and he's a better man than me. And now, again, I know this man, I'll encourage the fight, just like I texted you, hey, I still want to get into love the guy. Okay, yeah, I still want to drugs and do a lot. I'm sure Buster was too, but the guy paid a letter. And if you just be somebody, you feel like I'm just somebody who likes to argue. My mom will tell you that's probably my favorite sport. So fortunately, the schools can't caught my attention because I've been out for years and I had no idea what else came back into kindergarten start. CRT, SEL, sharing my child academic data with third-party internet sites.
I think this is getting kind of
Stop.
Yeah, but we'll come back to it. We'll come back to it. I think this is a good chance for people to voice the other stuff. We'll get back to it. I apologize.
Okay, hold on. Yeah, it is off the mask topic. Yeah, so. Yes, it is. So, again, what I'm asking is to be respectful. So I'm not disagreeing with you, okay? But I think what Aaron is saying is this is a symptom of a bigger issue, and that's why he was tying it back to the masks. And I don't think that some other parents don't necessarily agree that they don't like everything we do.
This is another example.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry to feel I'm wasting your time. And I truly do apologize. But you know what? I think it's important enough that parents have a say in this. It was appalling. There's no parent teacher association. There was no one. We have no oversight on any decision making in the school. And that is not.
So to be clear, there's a couple of things. There's a principal teacher, or principal parent advisory committee that if you're interested in, just reach out to your principal, they will approve. They meet monthly and they literally go over, here's what's going on in our school, or here's what's coming up, what do you think? And I believe there was a PTA. Yeah.
How do you start a PTA?
You just go to your principal, say we want to start a PTA. That's it. They will be excited to have a PTA, I think. It depends on what the PTA is, right? Okay, can we come back? Can we go back to questions or comments on masks? Yes.
My child refused to wear a mask. Last year I was told they would have to be forced to be remote. What happens this year?
Great question. So what will happen to a child who refuses to wear a mask for any number of reasons, right? Either they're being openly defiant or they're just having a terrible day. We will do everything in our power to accommodate your child and help them, either put them in an area where they don't have to wear one for a short period of time, talk them back into wearing one, help them through what they're going through. But if a kid just blatantly refuses to wear a mask, they will go home. Well, yeah. So what if they just say, I'm never gonna wear one, then they will be home for an extended period of time. And there'll be asynchronous learning, they'll get the information, and they'll have to access teachers, and they'll have to, and again, we're trying not to make this disciplinary in any way, shape, or form, but I understand the frustration, yes.
Okay, so I looked at the schedule and stuff for this upcoming school year, and I see recess schedules and stuff like that. And I know that younger kids get more recess, which as they should, because they're tiny. But is there gonna be max breaks involved for students that actually, like older students, besides the 15, 20-minute recess break that might need to take a max break? Are you guys gonna offer them a spot to be like, okay, never, let's space out, let's max break time? Is that gonna be enough?
Yeah, so we're gonna try to do the exact same things we did last year. We're gonna have, again, when we can, as many classes outside, as many times outside, the ability to have mask breaks where possible. We're gonna do, we recognize for the kids, most kids, again, the vast majority of our kids were great. Where they didn't want to wear them, it was because they were sick of wearing them. Yeah, they weren't being defiant, so we tried to work with them to do that. But yes, we're gonna do that. There's another one over here, yes. So the question is, where's the accountability for schools? I've mentioned the two ways that schools can be held accountable. No. So if you read this is the ISBRE is empowered with the ability to put us the challenge our recognition under we're doing something that's unsafe for kids. How will they know? You mean, how will they know we weren't following the mandate? Well, because generally what happens outside of Facebook and any number of other things, I'm just assuming, I don't work down in Springfield, but I am assuming they have people who are literally monitoring this stuff all the time. Because like, how did they find out Red Hill's a really tiny little place in Southern Illinois. How did they know Red Hill wasn't going to do it? Yeah, and so somebody did, and they found out, and they put them on probation immediately. So there's a young man. Yes.
How come last year they didn't do mask breaks for us?
What grade?
8. They didn't do any.
They didn't do any?
Nope, unless Mr. Gale said that we could. That was once.
So Mr. Gale said that you could.
Yeah, that was only once. Other than that,
You didn't have one mask break.
yeah, that's all we got. There were mask breaks.
Well, I will personally talk to our 7th and 8th grade teachers to ask them as much as they can to give you masks. I think that's a fair question. So I want to be clear and I want to. This is like wonderful, right? So here's a student speaking up for themselves at public meetings. So this is fantastic. Very well done. Yes.
So Durand, I'm sure you've heard that Durand is defined the mandate. So if I know you had said earlier, if there's a path to winning, so if Durand doesn't have any repercussions, would Oregon follow their example?
I think the board would take that into consideration. So I talked with the superintendent from Durand and said, what went into your decision? Who's your law firm? Like, the first thing I asked, who's your law firm? I'm like, hey, maybe we retain them. And who's your insurer?
Sure.
So he told me that the law firm told him don't do it. Different law firm than ours. And the insurers that don't do it, different insurer than ours. Their board said that they're going to define the governor's order and wait to see what ISD does, and if ISD comes with repercussions, they will reconsider their decision. Now, that was before Dr. Ayala, who's the state superintendent, sent that email at 4/22 that I forwarded to you that said there are going to be repercussions. Now, are there? I don't know. I think once you get on that ledge and say you're going to do it, you know, as a parent, if you don't do it, you lose all credibility. So, question. I'll come back. So generally what happens is I love the state, I think they do wonderful things, but when I get stuff from them, the first thing I do is go to our attorneys and say, what do I really have to do to make it? And that's how we get a lot of things that we get sent by law that look like we have to do some things. There's some gray area our attorneys allow us to have. So we go to our attorneys immediately to ask those questions. The FOIA request? Have we FOIA? FOIA who? Oh, no, we haven't done any FOIA to the district. Yeah, no, believe me, I'm living it, so you have a question. I agree, yes.
This is more of a statement than a question.
Statement.
To go back to your local control. The local control is electing your school board. So it's no different than government. When you elect your elected officials, that's your local control. So Mr. Mahoney is bound by the state. He's stuck in a position that's no win. The governor says this is what he recommends to the board. As a community, we can leverage our opinions with the board and say, hey, we don't want to re-elect you if you don't defy the governor's orders, and apply pressure that way to see if they defy the orders. One thing that could work towards beating the governor is what so many local businesses can strengthen numbers. If everybody's defiant, it makes it hard for him to enforce something. The problem is coordinating 200 school districts to defy the governor's orders.
Yeah, I think there's 846 school districts.
I'm just saying, like,
Yeah, I know, yeah. The other option is, you can sue the governor.
Yes.
You. So anybody here protesting masks, you can sue the governor. You don't have to wait for the school to do it.
I'll be taking a collection afterwards.
I will make a donation as a private citizen. So you can crowdfund a lawsuit. So Breeze, Illinois, which is in Southern Illinois, has a lawsuit against the governor. It was brought by a single parent to get an injunction against the mandate. So if you're feeling the need to do something, you can do it right now. You don't have to wait for me. You are in power right now to file a lawsuit. So sometimes the direction waiting for somebody else to do it, I'm just asking you, if you want to do it, I will help fund that lawsuit with you. I will, as a private, not as the superintendent of schools, as a private citizen, I will write you a check to the attorney you're using to fund that lawsuit. So if you want to do something, do something. Yelling at me may make me feel better. My wife does it all the time. It doesn't change my answer. I didn't make the decision rashly. I don't even like the decision, but I will help support you do it. If you want to do something, do something. Yes? Let me explain it. Okay. So let's talk about two things. The first is your question so they can understand it. The question was, is there a board policy or something in the student handbook that allows a school to discipline a student for not wearing a mask? There actually is a board policy. Last year, the board adopted policy prior to the COVID, or right when COVID hit, said that the mandates to be established could fall under student discipline. So that's how that got into board policy. We were actually going to amend that policy this year to allow it to be, it was much more restrictive last year, so we're trying to amend it to allow the superintendent to have latitude as guidance changes to amend that. The second question was, how can you treat kids who won't wear a mask the same as a kid who brings a weapon to school? Or we don't. We have lots of latitude. We will do everything in our power to not make it disciplinary at all. We don't want to kick your kid out of school. We literally want to keep your kid in school all day long. I'm going to gently answer that question. Okay. If you can't do it, no one can. They're your kids. I can tell you there's lots of things I hated about school. I was not a good student. It wasn't until I was 20 years old that I enjoyed school. So all the way from kindergarten till my sophomore year in college, I was suspended or kicked out of school about on an annual basis because I couldn't fit in this. So it was ultimately my parents' responsibility to try to help me develop coping mechanisms to do that. That can't fall on us. If your children just refuse, it's no different than anything else. It has to be the parent responsibility. The last thing is truancy, and then I'm going to get to this question. By law, we have to send letters. We tell the truancy officer, hey, this is COVID related. We have to send letters by law. So we're not sending them because we're trying to harass you. We're not sending them because you're a bad parent. We are simply following school code and sending those letters out. So we apologize for that. I'm just telling you, that's what we have. So I think the question was, how are we classifying? I think a couple things happened last year, especially with the shortened days and as well as remote learning. Like some kids were being absent because they weren't getting their work done. And parents were saying, well, they're working on it, they're just not getting done. We'll try to do better. But I can assure you, we are not plotting on you trying to make your life miserable. We're really not. So I'm sorry for the inconvenience. If we've done something wrong, we'll make it better. Okay? You can call me, you can email me if this comes up again, and we'll work through it. All right? Question?
Question statement type thing. It seems like a lot of this is happening. It's like before everybody rushes out to get a lawyer to sue state. Is anybody talking to the representative of the city? Okay. That's one thing first. It seems like everybody, I'm never allowed to do what I want to do my family. And I'm a unique individual. As long as I respect you, as long as you, and it's vaccinated, it can't be vaccinated. But the thing is, though, all of you remember, this is a place of education for our children.
I mean, our primary purpose is educating kids. I don't want to do any of this. Don't. So yes, the first thing I did was call Rep. Denver and Senator Stewart. Both are fully supportive of our position. Rep. Denver has, it was 2 days ago, implored ISD to say, either you're going to do something or you're not going to do something. Tell schools what you're going to do or not. That email was a direct result of an email from Tom Denver to Carmella, imploring her to either say what you're going to do or not going to do. So our reps have been actively supporting, but they are limited in what they do because the number of our reps. Yes? No. No. Yes, I will be more than happy. Yeah. Yeah, the other thing is, I think collectively we have a better idea. If somebody is good at organizing, the two things we could organize are personal invitation to give Governor Pritzker to school, participate in physical education with our little kids. And if you want to do a lawsuit, again, I'm assuming there's enough funding in this room to get an attorney. So if you want to put your money where your mouth is, I'm more than willing to do it with you. No, I won't do that. Like on a personal level, I will not do that. Everyone has some level that speaks my level. Yes.
So when you say you're with us, so say you don't want to do this. I don't know how much time you have before they actually put the injunctions on and say you can't be part of the IHSA. Why not throw it to the schools? Just push it, just see how far you can get it. Because you say, you know, one person is a safe, it's tough, man. They just slap them away like no big deal. If you get multiple school districts saying, we don't want to follow, and you got multiple lawyers doing that. I'm not saying push it to the point where, oh crap, none of our kids play sports now. I'm saying push it to the point where they're like, either you do it now or we're to start injunction.
Yeah, so the question is, why don't we just take the risk? Right? I mean, what's the worst thing that happen? Well, I'm generally a fairly not a fairly risk-averse person, it doesn't bother me. Based on how I understand what occurs with insurers and again, I have a lot of people say they'd never be able to show you that you were the one responsible for this. I know that this is going to be alarming, but in our society, people sue the deepest pockets, whether there's a case or not. You may have seen a lot of people sue.
So when does the mask mandate expire, and who's going to pay for the masks? They're jacking up the prices in all of the stores. I mean, especially when it first started. Only the N95 mask has been the only one proven to kind of slow the transmission. So there's no universal mask recommended.
So, two questions. When does it end? It would go until the governor's order expires. If he doesn't renew it, I think it's a month long. It's a 30-day order, so whenever it's 30 days, let's renew it. The second thing, who's paying for masks? We will provide masks for students who don't remember the masks, but it's no different than, in our minds, a shirt. You're responsible to provide the mask on an ongoing basis. Now, these kids every day don't have one, then we're going to have a conversation about charging for the mask.
Can we charge for the mask?
Yeah, we can try to charge for the mask. Yes?
Okay, so this is just some evidence saying this doesn't work, and then I have a question.
The first, he's going to provide evidence of why masks don't work, and then he's got a question.
So it says on the box, this face mask should not be used for antimicrobial or antiviral protection or related uses, or used by infection prevention or reduction or related uses. And then,
No, why do you think manufacturers put that disclaimer on their box? So they don't get sued because they're threatened by the law. The people who sue them don't they have to spend money for it. What's your question?
and the question is, why don't we just have people sign a paper that says, if your child gets COVID, we are not responsible. Because then,
Yeah, the waiver, yeah. I'll talk to our attorney, and we'll let you into a little secret school law. Your waivers have no meaning in court. They don't hold in court. So if you sign a waiver on transportation, and you say, well, you signed a waiver that said you wouldn't sue us, it means nothing.
Even if it's like
Yes.
Yeah, even, okay.
All of them, yes. So I'm gonna move on to the next person's question, yes.
So once again, Mr. Mahoney represents the district, not necessarily us, but we're part of the district. So that speech would be great at the next board meeting. 6:30, because
Yeah, but that's not true, because all of our, exactly, because that's the board.
Technically, the board has one employee, that's me. They hire one person and I hire everybody else. And then you hire the board.
Yes. So that's.
Right, I understand how all that works. We still work for us in this district. We pay all the tax dollars, right? Okay, why do you think your tax dollars not go up $500 a year, $1,000 a year?
Yeah.
What I'm saying is, I still would like to know, are you sticking with that email now? So are you not?
Yeah, I have not changed my position, and I certainly will reflect on everything we say today. But I don't know if there's been somebody that moved me to say that I'm willing to put the district in a position that they could be at this right now. So, yes.
All right, quick question. A lot of you don't want that, but that's great. That's how we feel. So how about respect for others?
Don't give them the
So,
If you want to wear a mask.
whoa. This is not gonna be good for everybody. So I get, like, first of all, I get the emotion. I wanna be clear. I understand why you're angry. I get it. But we're all fighting for the same thing. When I sent the original email out, I got 10 emails from parents who said to me, I can't believe you made this mask option. You obviously don't care about the health and well-being of my child. When I sent out the other emails that were in reply, I got 10 emails. I can't believe you did this. You obviously don't care about the health and well-being of my child. So all I've learned when I send these emails out is I don't care about kids. Right? That's the common denominator. You are not the enemy against each other. To be clear, the first option allowed full respect for anybody who was one of the master did. And even if you don't like it, you're not the problem. You are just following what we have to follow, or not following what we have to follow. It's not you. So I don't want it to devolve into that. Right.
I had my doubts when I saw that first email from you. This is great. I saw the second one, it was even happy that the third one came along. Demolished. The other one came along. Really made me. I know there are a lot of parents. But I can tell by listening to you right now, talking to everybody, we do have a lot of arguments. Okay, and I can see that he's trying. We've always got a great point. Push it. He's got a great point. But one little point that like I said, don't push it. I'm sorry, excuse me, I don't know who you are, I have no disrespect for you, but you ask for respect from others. You also should also get it from others. I'm not gonna have you think, what I'm gonna say, you want the respect of others, correct? You want the respect of others. When you're masking, anybody else that wants to wear a mask, that is your choice. Just like we want to have this choice. I want to have that choice for my kid. Okay? You want your kids to wear masks? Go for it. I'm not stopping you. You want your kids 10 feet apart from each other? Go for it. Okay?
It is not.
What is up, yes.
I don't know. You have a lot of disrespect for myself. Okay? Right now, I'm watching you. This is a little different. Like I said, I agree with all of it. You want to go for it. You've got the backing. You've got the majority. You already told us in this community how many people? About 78%.
Well, I'm just guessing, given our demographics, about 80%.
You're pretty close to the number of actually getting 89, right? I mean, pretty close. You're 99% survival, right? So push them.
Greg's point is, if we do take the push point, then we should just keep going and not worry about backing up until we're forced. Yes.
I think too, is when you said maybe it's the parents' responsibility to teach their kids how to, it starts at home. And all we're asking is they have their responsibility to choose if we're gonna have our child mask or not. And you even said you told the board your recommendation of not following principal's orders. So what if you change, what if,
Also, have you thought about any liabilities, if kids get pneumonia or sickness from wearing these masks, especially if they're in sports all the time, and they get sick by wearing masks? Have you thought about any liabilities you look for, or credit for that?
Again, we would be limited in our liabilities if we have the Tort Immunity Act. That occurs in the actual activity of running schools under the current guidelines. I know it sounds crazy. Believe me, I understand that from the field. Okay? So the statement was more, would I consider changing my recommendation to the board? And again, what I said just a moment ago, not right now, but I certainly will listen to everything that's been said and think through it, and also then talk with our attorney about any ideas that were brought up. So this is supposed to be give and take, so I can listen also. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, that's a question. It seems like we're all worried about insurance companies, correct? A lot of insurance liabilities. Have you guys checked that out of state insurer? I mean, they're all.
Yeah, so we used to have an insurer out of Hanover, used to be ours, which was out of Indiana. And I forget the second one we had out of Chicago. Now we're with a cooperative that has a large number, 400 schools. So yeah.
Well, why don't we search for a more conservative insurance company? I haven't, believe me, so I haven't found an insurance company, no matter what their values are, that literally are saying, hey, we'll cover you regardless of what you do. So, but I don't mind looking, yeah, right, yeah. And they pray to God that you never have
An issue.
claim of some kind.
Yeah.
So we just find out insurance company like that. We don't have to.
Yeah. Maybe, yes. Yeah.
So how do you go so far as to say, but what if, this said, we don't want to make our community. And we're not going all out, we're not saying we're not going to listen, you're staying around. You're just making the governor aware that nobody in your community wants to be told that. Nobody wants
Yeah.
to have the freedom of choice.
Yeah.
They can keep that.
Yeah, so there is a coalition building right now that actually has started in Southern Illinois, and it's working its way up here. I'm part of the group right now. What the focus of the group right now is really leveraging, is there a way to defeat the governor, not necessarily say, we're just against it. So, but that may be another alternative to say, but we can, two fronts. One front would be a massive letter of 400 superintendents saying, we disagree with you, and the other one would be continue to pursue potentially legal options that may or may not be available. Yes?
So I think that willing, but what about a survey to the community, parents? If you got enough benefit to be willing to.
No, because that's a fair question, like why won't you survey us on this issue? And the reason is because it's about the liability, and you have the right to say, I don't care what happens. It's so important to me we don't wear masks, I don't care. Well, if you're wrong, or I'm wrong, I literally have put the district in a position where it could be bankrupt. And that is a huge issue, that in the moment of people are like, we don't care, let's do it. I mean, how many times, if you have not grown up and done this, I think you're pretty lucky, let's do it. And then you get halfway through, you're like, oh shit, what do we do? Right? That sounds like that to me, but this is an emotionally driven thing. I don't want to make that decision. I'm trying to make it on what I think long-term interest is best for the district.
But then what about as far as, I think someone said, us parents that don't want to swear a mask, sign a waiver.
Again, as I would ask our attorneys, I'll send an email tonight. My guess is they're going to tell us the waivers mean nothing and would not remove any liability, but I will ask the attorney. Jim?
I know BJ said that, I think Chris was saying,
Yeah, again, I'm not opposed to not doing the survey, yes, yeah.
I'm not saying sue it.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
We think it's a good idea. Yeah, PJ sent an email to us, Tony, right away this morning. And if you didn't know, PJ Capozzi used to work here, and now is at Meridian as the superintendent there. He emailed, we as county superintendents have been collaborative in sharing our information. He emailed me, I don't know what it was, 10 o'clock, so I had to send this to the governor, just an FYI. And then he encourages other districts who are interested in doing it. Yes?
What's the end game for the mask? Like how, so if he wants to extend it for the next 2, 3, 4 years, I guess, what's the end game, or what would be his parameters on which to end the mask mandate? Did he give you any parameters on which to end it?
So that, the two things, I think there's two questions. Number one, are there conditions that would exist that allow you to waive the mask mandate? So our plan was not based on feedback from families that said we don't want masks.
Right.
Our plan was actually based on our local data is low. We don't have a lot of transmission. We don't have a lot of cases. So why would we need to mask our kids if we don't have cases? Now, if our cases really rose in our buildings, then we would say, hey, for 2 weeks we're going to mask because we have spread in the buildings. We don't want to get kids sick. Then we would, right, that was what that plan was based on. Because I thought you should let your local data drive your decisions. So he has not really said number one. Number two, what's the end game in terms of what he can do? So there was a lawsuit brought by a rep Daley from downstate suing his ability to have multiple 30-day executive orders. I think in Clay County, he won, and then they got appealed and moved to Sangamon County in the second appellate, and it was overturned, and that case is now the case that's referenced in every other case that allows him to keep rolling over these. So I don't know what the end game is. Yeah, yes. Per the state, you read that email. The two things I think the state said they would do is they would stop providing our $3.6 million that we get annually from them. We would get some, obviously, and they would stop after that. There's transportation funding, special ed funding, reimbursement for lunch, assuming that would stop. And my guess is if we're not recognizing as a school, any of our federal grants can't be passed through to us because we're no longer recognized as schools. That would be all of our title money, Title I, Title II money. So that's a lot that supports our special ed kids. And then the ESSER grant, the CARES money that we got. We got about a total of $3.3 million. We spent $300,000 last year. We're spending $1 million this year and $2 million over the next couple of years. We wouldn't have access to that. My guess is to your point that schools who go on probation, if you remedy, either they don't pull the money out, they just threaten you with it, and then if you remedy, they let you have all the money. But funding-wise, we've got about $9 million in the bank, so we would be able to survive that funding-wise in the short term. Now, if it happened for a whole year, it would be a problem. Yes?
Look at our kids in masking them, it's flat out. But starting out, masking them, and then being able to organize be successful, and they're able to win all lessons, whatever, and be like, hey, follow this and piggyback on it. Now, we can look at not masking them. Student-wise, teacher-wise, because I'm a teacher at a different kind of chain, so we follow the top of the board, and whatever they do. It's a lot easier for the students and a lot easier for the staff to get the students to be masked and then take it away and be like, nope, mask out, so you don't have to wear it, and then all of a sudden, all the lawsuits come in and they start looking at people that nobody's responding to have to start masking our kids. That's going to be a bigger problem for teachers and students alike. So that's something to think about too, and that really comes back to our kids and how they're going to respond to that and how it's going to affect them. So just thinking about different things we've done, not necessarily real masking. Starting it and taking it away is a lot easier than not having it trying to put it in place.
Now you're getting to the point where you're like, you're not a Horseshack yet, but you're just a hand.
Are you getting emails?
From whom? I'm on the Facebook page. I'm not on an email distribution. Not that I'm aware of. I haven't deleted anything. I don't remember anything like that. Yeah, I saw it. I've been following. Yeah, I've been following. Now you do? I like how that just happened. Just came.
So, Matt, is there a guideline that says how they have to be?
Yes, over the nose, over the mouth, down the chin. It's in the guidance. I want to be clear. We are going to do the best we can to accommodate kids and we don't want to be the mask police. We do not want to be the mask, right? Okay.
I just want to put the mask on your face.
Well, we don't want to have to threaten parents. We don't want to threaten them. We would like to work with you, and sometimes, as a child who is non-compliant, my parents weren't threatened, they were more pleaded with, can you please do something about Tommy, because I don't want him back in class tomorrow. So I think really, I know that comes across as threatening, but really, they're really pleading with you. Our teachers don't want to keep saying, wear your masks, wear your masks. They don't want to. They don't want to be mask police. No teacher started their career and said, you know what, I can't wait to ride some second-grader's butt so he gets his mask on. Yes! That is not motivating or encouraging. They would have been much happier in terms of their responsibility to have the option the first time. Yes?
Is there a guideline for what kind of mask we need to wear?
Yeah, there are guidelines on what's available. Again, IUPH has that listed. So yeah, like a piece of screen over your mouth will not work.
I wouldn't say it in pieces.
Yeah. See, you're thinking like I used to think. Okay, I gotta wear a mask. Okay, let me see what I can do. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, so I'll say that here is that Carmen Ayala email. No, my boss is the Board of Education. Okay. Carmen Ayala is the state superintendent of schools. She is an appointed position to Governor Pritzker. So, yeah, now it's making sense to you, huh? And so that position is appointed by the sitting governor and can stay as long as that governor or following governor reappoint that person.
You know, the governor's got a mask on.
Okay. It is 7:25, and again, I needing to get up and go. You're more than welcome to leave. If you want to stay and ask some additional questions, I'll stick around. More than happy to answer any of your questions, but if you feel like you need to go, feel free to go ahead and leave. Yes? Just did. Why do they get 2 o'clock every Wednesday? So we used to have a rotating every other week 1 hour out. We would take that 1 hour and we would get our staff together to work on professional development. And what we discovered was, by the time they got the kids out, back to their rooms and started working again, it really ended up about a 20-minute meeting because it just takes time to transition. The teachers, at no extra cost to the district, had agreed 2 years ago in the contract to add an extra hour to their workday, contractual workday, and stay for 2 hours on Wednesdays and work on the data that we need to review for students, professional development, other professional meetings, and professional obligations. So every Wednesday we do those things during that time period so they got out at 2 o'clock. Yes?
A lot of school districts are doing that. This is great. Now all of us at work. Look, we don't have all these extra teacher institute days showing us like, well, we're going to take off again. We're finding 8 years for something we don't want to spend again.
That was the Yes. He said, a lot of districts have moved to either a late start or an early out, and then you have fewer half-day institute days throughout the year, so you have less of those days you have to then have. You have 4, but you can split them. 2 o'clock on Wednesday, yeah, so shorter days to match on those days too. Other questions? I greatly appreciate you coming. I will stick around afterwards if you have questions. You have my email. Even if it's a nasty gram, I welcome the conversation. I get it. I understand. You may not like my answer, but I'll always try to be honest with you. Thank you so much for coming. Take care.
Yeah. I'm a lot more sensitive and supportive of your decision. Thank you very much. You're not native from this area. No. Okay. That community I grew up in,